This is one of the most famous and one of the greatest American cars of all time, certainly right up there with the Duesenberg. It's the Mercer Raceabout. This is a 1913 Mercer Raceabout. Actually, there was a time when these were more expensive than the Duesenberg. This particular car here is quite well known. In fact, back in the 60s, it was the highest price ever paid for an antique car. A guy bought it for $45,000, which was unheard of because at the time Duesenbergs were $20,000 to $25,000. A Mercer Raceabout was made in Trenton, New Jersey, and you could literally drive it off the showroom floor, take off the lights, take off the fenders, and go racing with it as Pullen did right here in the Grand Prix in Santa Monica. That's an original, it's not a reprint, that's the San Francisco Chronicle from the year. And these are all other famous Mercers. I'm not sure how many are left, maybe 20, 25. People wonder why they are primarily yellow and black. As I said, they were built in Trenton, New Jersey, and the rumor is that Princeton's colors were yellow and black, and the idea was rich fathers would buy this car for their sons going to Princeton, so let's paint it the Princeton colors. You know, when you ever see those old pictures of the guys in the raccoon coats and the, you know, the flags, they're always driving something like a Mercer. You know, when I was a little kid, there were tons of car songs. Little GTO, Hey Little Cobra, just a bunch of car songs. Little Deuce Coupe, you know, all those 409 by the Beach Boys. Well, back in the teens, in my Mercer racing car was a popular song, just like it was in the 60s, and that's what it's based on. You see the guys going on his Mercer racing car. Don't ask me to sing it. I have no idea how the tune goes. As I said, these were built in Trenton, New Jersey by the Roeblings. The company went out of business when the Roeblings decided to take a ship voyage to celebrate. The boat they chose was the Titanic. I don't have to explain what happened there. And then the company kind of fell apart after that. Now, although cars in 1913 did have electric lights and electric starters, the Mercer Runabout could be had with electric lights and electric starters, but the Raceabout was considered the racing model, and to keep it extremely lightweight, it had gas lamps, which just literally lift off, so you could go racing. You didn't carry a heavy starter or any of that other stuff. These were quite advanced for the day. I think more advanced even than the Stutz Bearcat. You know, the Mercer owners and the Stutz owners used to throw rocks at each other, you know. There's nothing worser than a Mercer. That's what the Stutz people would say, and the Mercer people would say, you got to be nuts to drive a Stutz. And you know, it's like kind of like Mustang and Camaro. The one interesting thing about these cars was, back in the day, people drove enormous engines in big, heavy chassis, 10-liter Fiats, 13-liter Fiats, 9-liter locomobiles. The Mercer was the first car of the period to have a small engine, relatively small, 300 cubic inch, in a lightweight frame, much like maybe a Lotus Elan or one of those kind of cars. So it beat, or like Bugatti even, it beat all the big heavier cars of the day because it was more nimble and could accelerate quickly because it wasn't carrying as much mass. It was a lightweight car that really was just a chassis with fenders. I think it's really aesthetically pleasing because it's a real form follows function kind of car. There's nothing on this car that doesn't need to be there. Well, with the exception maybe the searchlight and the clock and the speedometer. 2 seats, monocle windshield, very sexy. Here you have 2 pumps, one for gas, one for oil. Actually, that's gas and that's oil. The idea being in a race, your mechanic who drove with you could pump extra oil into the crankcase. There is no electrical fuel pump or mechanical fuel pump. It's a pressurized gas tank. You pressurize it by pumping it up here, as you'll see when we start it in just a minute. You hand crank it. It's got Rudge wire wheels, and again, most cars of the day had wooden wheels. The Rudge wire wheels were a pretty sexy option, just like wire wheels were up until just recently. Brakes on the rear only. That's the way they did it. Oil was carried in this side of the tank. Gasoline was carried in this side of the tank. You have an acetylene tank here for your lights. Well, I use acetylene, but they would use like carbide gas. I've got just an air horn on there. This is your choke. This is your gas. This is your advance and retard. These are gas lamps. You light those with a match. You got your feet outside here on the gas pedal. That's your brake, but it's not a wheel brake, it's a transmission brake. Your wheel brake is right here. When you want to brake your rear wheels, you pull that back there. Come on, let's take a look at the engine. This is what they call a T-head Mercer, or a T-head engine. They call it a T because you have a valve on each side. You have your piston in the center with a valve on each side. The valve's going this way, so it looks like a T. This is quite a popular configuration in the day. A lot of low-end torque. These were rated at 35 horsepower, which doesn't sound like very much. I can cruise on the freeway at 75, 80, and it's a lot of fun. Don't try stopping, but you can cruise at that speed. And the engine just chugs along. There's no tachometer. 1,800 RPM is just about the end of the world of these things. They just doom, doom, doom. They just pound. But as you can see, for its day, that's a fairly small motor. You know, most cars of this period would have these big, enormous lumps in the front, so consequently, they would be fast going down the straightaway, but they wouldn't handle as nicely as this. Let's take a look at the exhaust side of the engine. Always like undoing these straps. I don't know. Here's your exhaust manifold here. Here's your water pump. This is all gear driven in here. As you can see, my coating is starting to come off my cylinders. You can't porcelain coat anymore because you can't use lead. As you see, there are 4 spark plugs, 1 on each side, 1 over each valve. There is no oil pump. It's a splash system of lubrication, so there's no oil pressure gauge. You just have a sight gauge on the dashboard, which is right here. There are little cups that pick up oil and throw it literally into that window. And you see if you see the oil being thrown, well, it means the oil's being thrown around, and you're probably okay. When it's not throwing oil around, you're a dead man. These are not shock absorbers. People sometimes mistakenly call them shock absorbers. They're a dampener. When you have a spring, springs obviously give in both directions, like boing, boing, boing. So to keep you from boinging, boinging down the road, you have a dampener. As the spring compresses, you adjust how quickly you want it to return back up. So you hit the bump, and then you come back up slowly. And that's what the dampener does. It brings you back up slowly, so you're not pogoing down the highway. And then, as you see, you can set them to your desired level of harshness that you want. Let's get ready to take it for a ride. First, I'll turn on the gas, which is under here. Next, you want to pump up fuel pressure. Look at the gasoline gauge on the dashboard there. I want about 2 pounds of pressure to start. Okay. Set my choke. Now these here are your priming cups. You put a little bit of gasoline in each one of these, and what that does is it shoots raw fuel directly into the cylinder. I mix my gasoline with some, I use avgas, a little bit of oil in it so it lubricates the cylinder so I'm not washing down the walls as I do it. Then you open that. That sends your gas directly into the cylinder. Seal them up. You have 2 settings. You have coil, and then you have magneto. Now I have a small battery in the back. There's a tremor coil. You hear it buzzing? Okay. That's sending a spark in there now. You want to turn your advance retard down to retard, give it a little gas, a little bit of choke. Make sure you're in neutral so you don't run over yourself. See what happens. Whenever starting a car like this, you always want to make sure your thumb is inside. You never want to grab it like that, because if it backfires, it'll rip your thumb off. So, you want to make sure you do it this way. Then I switch over to magneto. See how it smooths out? As you can see, it's fairly easy to start. Most modern cars, you crank them, they got to crank 3 or 4 times. Just one little lift up, boom. If you got a strong magnet, you'll fire. So normally something else I would do, I would lift up the floor, take out the floorboards, clutch, transmission, and I would check my fluid levels. I just checked them 2 days ago when I drove this, so they were fine. But you can actually see your gears in here and, of course, your clutch in there. Beautiful transmission. Brown and Lippy, I believe, is the name of the manufacturer. The best pre-war 4-speed transmission I've ever driven. Very smooth, No synchros, none of just click, just big gears that do this. Fantastic. This right here is your exhaust cutout. When you're out on the open road and you want to open your exhaust, just press that with your foot. And you bypass your muffler. Let me put my jacket on. And you can see the oil flowing. And we can open that exhaust. As you can see, there's no temperature gauge on the dashboard. These cars have what's known as a motometer. Once it gets in the circle, we've warmed up. Once you're out of town, you open on the open road, you can open that exhaust. Nothing like the sound of a T-head. And listen how smoothly she shifts. Look at that. It's like a modern 4-speed. Brilliant transmission. Wonderful clutch. I can see we're traveling 55 miles an hour. I barely have my foot on the gas. The engine sounds like it's loafing. I'm pumping up my fuel, as you can see on the fuel gauge. There's nothing modern about this car. We haven't updated it in any way. The only things I've done is the Mercer race cars had enormous brake drums on the back. My friend Fred Hoke in New Jersey cast a set of those for me, so he put on the original style racing brake drums. But other than that, this is as you would have left the factory. Clock, speedometer, you can see the oil flowing. Believe me, 100 miles an hour in this feels like the end of the world. I can't imagine what it felt like in 1913. Model T barely went 42 miles an hour. That was their top speed. And this was just a little over 100, so this was like the Ferrari Enzo or the Lamborghini of its day. Fast, light, agile, terrific car. Nothing like pulling into traffic in a 100-year-old automobile. Windshield actually works pretty good. Not so good if you're the cameraman, but works great for me. You know, a lot of people like to call the Corvette America's first sports car, but in a lot of ways I think this really is. Because it actually beats all the cars of the day, not by sheer speed and power, but by a balance of power and handling and braking. Okay, forget the braking, but you got power and handling, and that was the thing. On the road courses of the day, like Savannah and the Santa Monica Grand Prix, nothing could beat these. This engine was designed by a guy named Ralph Finley Porter, RFP. He also built a car called the RFP. Mercer's, after about 1915, went to a different style of engine, I believe an F-head or an L-head, and they never had the magic of the early T-heads. They never regained that glory. And don't forget, back in 1913, 100 miles an hour was like 200 miles an hour would be to us today. Back in 1950, the fastest car in the world was the XK120, and that went 120 miles an hour. So 100 miles an hour in 1915 was really something. So right now I'm going to go relive those thrilling days of yesteryear and put some miles on this thing. We'll see you next week.
Mm-hmm.